guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're talking about a game that has kind of been in my backlog for a long time, and it's just been taking me forever to play it, Evil West. And with it being one of the PlayStation Plus games of the month, this month, I figured it was a great time to dive into it. But before we get started, guys, I'm Falso21. I love playing games and I love making videos. So if you guys like what you see, drop us a like on the video and consider subscribing to the channel. So Evil West has been out for a little over a year now, and honestly, I don't think there's a whole lot more to say that hasn't already been said. So instead of going into more depth than like I normally do for my videos, I figured I was just going to list some things that I really liked about the game and some things that I really did not like about the game. So starting off with the story, I'm going to be honest here, I thought the story was trash. I thought it had some good ideas, and with it being about a guy who kills vampires and monsters, but man, the writing here was just really awful in my opinion. All the dialogue for the characters was just so bad and so cringy pretty much the entire time. And actually, the worst part was the main character, the person you play as, Jesse. He was overly mad and aggressive the entire time, and it just got really old really fast. Like, I don't know why, but they just made him an extremely unlikable character. I just did not like Jesse whatsoever, which made it really hard to actually enjoy like the cutscenes. One, because just the dialogue was just so downright terrible. As far as the gameplay goes though, it was decent, and for me it was one of the more enjoyable parts of the game. It was pretty satisfying, shedding through vampires and killing all kinds of monsters. I also felt that they introduced weapons at like a steady pace, and they each have their own dedicated buttons, so you never had to pick and choose which weapons you wanted to use. You pretty much got every single weapon, other than like the crossbow where you had to switch out with like your main rifle, but other than that you got access to all of the weapons. The downside though to the combat is that they had like this electric dash thing that you could do, and it was kind of OP if I'm being honest. And using anything outside of like the dash punch electric combo thing just really didn't seem viable, like especially when there's a horde of enemies, because it would stun whatever enemy that you were around, and for some reason all the other enemies just kind of stop attacking you when you do this, like because I'd be like punching an enemy that's all electrified and like all the other enemies are just standing around. Another downside is the enemy variety. I felt like I fought pretty much the same 5 enemies over and over again, with the last couple missions being just giant like hordes of enemies and gauntlets of enemies of literally the same enemy types. That said, there were a few boss fights that I thought were pretty decent, especially the last boss fight, Felicity I believe was her name, was a pretty enjoyable fight overall. There was also a couple others, like there's like this giant like worm thing that you fought. That one was also pretty fun. I also really enjoyed all of the artwork for the game. I just loved how all of the levels looked. Aesthetically, everything looked really cool. All the enemies and the bosses looked incredible. Although, like when they're, like as I mentioned earlier, when there's just hordes of enemies, it's really hard to kind of distinguish each enemy, and it just kind of turns into like a giant red blur. But the designs for everything were great. I really enjoyed it. As far as level design goes, it's very linear, with really not much to do outside of just following the path. There are a few collectibles here and there that like are kind of off the path, but it's very like you go down this one and it's a dead end and then you turn around. There are a few collectibles, but most of the level you're just kind of being escorted from point A to point B, and you could very much tell the path was very straightforward. Like I mentioned, there was maybe 1 or 2 deviations, but they all led to dead ends and usually had like money or loot or something like that at the very end. And they would always enter into like this big arena, which would always be a big enemy encounter, whether it was a big boss or, you know, another horde of enemies. So it was very much the same thing over and over again. It was more or less just walk down the path, maybe solve an incredibly easy puzzle here or there, enemy encounter or boss fight, rinse and repeat. I think if they had a few more unique enemies or bosses, it wouldn't feel so samey, because after like the first hour or so, like the normal gameplay loop and the areas just kind of felt samey. Yes, they looked different whenever you got to new places, but everything just looked the same and it just got really repetitive. You do go to a few different locations, so that was nice to like shake things up. There's areas like a big oil field and through a canyon. But as I mentioned earlier, at the end, they all just suffered from the same formula of fairly straight path with an enemy counter or boss fight at the end. There was like 1 or 2 missions where you're like in a mining cart and you're speeding down the track, which was really nice, and you had to like shoot like the explosives or the switches. but there's literally like 2 of those missions in the whole game, and that's really it. So there wasn't enough to really kind of break up that repetition, at least for me. But as I said, I thought the combat overall was fairly enjoyable, and it was pretty fun, you know, just shredding through vampires and monsters. And overall, I think I enjoyed Evil West for what it was. Especially after a long day and you just want to sit down and just kind of shred through monsters. Kind of like one of those games where you get home after a long day's work, you just want to sit down and shut your brain off and play for a little bit. It's very much this. The story, like I mentioned, wasn't super good. Like, I liked the premise that they were going for, but just the execution just was not very good in my opinion. The dialogue was bad, and just the way that they told the story was just not very good. I don't know what it was, but... So, with that said, overall, I'm going to give Evil West a 6 out of 10. I'm going to put it in the same vein as these games here. If you liked Atlas Fallen or Forspoken, I feel like this is kind of within those same vein. You'll probably enjoy this game. So if you like those, you might enjoy this. Yeah, but I don't know what it is about these games that have to do with gauntlets. It's like Atlas Fallen, Forspoken, and now Evil West they all have gauntlets. Crappy story. Decent gameplay. Anyways, guys, that is going to be it for today's video. Like, dislike, subscribe, whatever you guys feel like, and I'll see you guys on the next video.